The holiday travel season is upon us. You may be preparing to take your family on a long car ride or be flying somewhere. Your travels may be taking you to stay with family or to stay in a hotel. Some children will be sleeping in their own room during these trips, and some of you will need to be room sharing. And on top of everything else, many will be traveling to different time zones. And you're navigating some family expectations. So, today I'm going to share tips to help you with all these different forms of travel and my thoughts on managing our families as we try to navigate keeping sleep schedules.
Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime.
Welcome back. It's the holiday season, which is either the most joyous or stressful time of the year. I know that we personally are preparing to travel to visit family over the Thanksgiving, and we've entered a different phase. I'm not trying to brag here, but it does get better, you guys. So we're no longer nearly as stressed when we travel with our kids. But for years, I always said that when you travel with babies or young kids, particularly around the holidays, it's not a vacation. It's really more of a quote trip because there is so much to juggle and so many ways for it to go south. And I know from personal experience that one of the fastest ways to have a trip suddenly feel like a nightmare is to end up with an overtired baby or an overtired child or children. I've shared this story before, but my lowest point of parenting happened when I was at my parents' house for Christmas when Addison was nearly 2 years old and Ainsley was about 5 months. I was trying to make everyone happy and I broke. I visibly broke, and it still pains me to think about that whole Christmas trip. But good things came from me hitting that rock bottom. I really learned to take charge of my family's sleep when we traveled, and I learned to manage the expectation of our family members without worrying about what they thought. And that's a big one. So today I want to help you plan for a smooth trip that doesn't end with everyone being exhausted and broken. I'm just going to dive right in with the most valuable tip I have for you, and then we'll get into the logistics. The most important thing you can do, and I really mean this, it might be the hardest, but the most important thing you can do is maintain your child's sleep schedule. I know this isn't easy, particularly when you're managing family members and visiting with as many people as possible and long histories of how we do things. But man, it sure does increase the fun factor when you're able to keep your children well rested. I know that maintaining sleep schedules can feel challenging right out of the gate because you have a travel day to navigate. So let's start there. If you're traveling by car, the best thing you can do is work to ensure that your child naps during their typical nap windows. It can be tempting to just let them sleep whenever they want to, particularly if they're a good car sleeper, because you want some quiet time during that drive. In fact, you want as much quiet time as possible. But the potential problem with letting your child just sleep whenever they want to in the car is that you arrive at your destination and your child is already off their schedule. If you have a child who's prone to falling asleep in the car, I find the easiest way to keep those naps on schedule is to have a parent sit in the back and engage with the baby or the child until you're about within 15 minutes of their nap start time. I realize this is assuming that you have two parents in the car, which makes it easier. The other opportunity you have is to try to have an older child, keep a younger child entertained, or really just be chit chatty and keep them up until they're in that nap window. Once you're close to that nap window, within about 15 minutes, you can climb up front, turn off the music, turn down whatever else you may have been listening to, turn off any screens, turn on some white noise. I'm going to link to my favorite travel white noise machine in the show notes, and then sit quietly until your child falls asleep. Once they fall asleep, you can go back to chatting with your partner or listening to some music or a podcast, and it probably won't disrupt your child's sleep. But to help them go to sleep, I find it's helpful to kind of shut everything down. If your child really likes sleeping in the car, you may find that you actually need to wake them from their nap to protect their next nap start window or to protect bedtime. It's fine to let them sleep a little bit longer than usual because car sleep, that movement sleep, isn't as restorative as flat, motionless sleep in the crib or in your bed. But we don't want them to sleep too much outside of their typical nap window because once again, it could throw off the next nap, it could throw off bedtime, etc. Then once they're up, if you're still on that long car ride, you may need to entertain them again if you start to think they may snooze. And while my husband and I are not people who can safely drive through the night, I have lots of clients who take this approach. And if you are the type of people who are going to drive during the night, then I recommend handling sleep in a similar way. Have your little one in their pajamas, keep them up until you're within about 15 minutes of their typical bedtime, and then let them fall asleep. And when you reach your destination, if it's still the middle of the night, just transfer them right into their bed. I do find sometimes with the littles, if they wake up, and even if you're someone who hasn't been doing night feedings, but if you do a feeding before bedtime, if they wake up during this transfer, I do think sometimes it's helpful to just go ahead and feed them. You don't need to do a full bedtime routine, but kind of feed them like you would before putting them to bed at home and then put them down. That can be helpful if the transfer is hard. Now, let's talk about flying. Obviously, it's going to be trickier to maintain your children's sleep schedule when you fly. If you're able to book a flight that aligns with your children's nap, that's amazing. But if you're not and you end up dealing with delays or something is just not going according to plan, please try not to panic about the sleep. I have a preference for flying earlier in the day so that if all else fails, I can hopefully protect bedtime. But that's not always possible either. There are fewer flights this year, and flights are so expensive that I feel like people have the least amount of flexibility on choosing their flights that they've had in years. So, depending on your child's age, I would just say take sleep where you can get it. If you still have a napper, take sleep where you can get it. Younger babies often sleep well on airplanes because they're like giant white noise machines. But then, as babies become more mobile, as we get closer to 12 months, some kids will really struggle to sleep on the plane, even if it is their nap time. So, that may mean that you're getting a nap in the stroller or the carrier at the airport or in the car on the way to your destination once you've arrived. If you have a child still napping, chances are they will get less total daytime sleep during this travel day than they typically would get at home. And it is very likely that not all of the sleep will occur during the typical nap windows. Stressing about this is not going to be helpful. You already have enough on your plate. So just go through the day reminding yourself that an early bedtime is your friend. I actually recommend building that idea into your schedule when you arrive. Plan to put your child to bed 30, 45, maybe even 60 minutes earlier than usual. And then if you end up not needing to do that, that's great. But if you do need that early rescue bedtime and you've planned for it, this is going to allow your child to make up for some of that missed daytime sleep and start your next day well rested. Okay, so you've made it to your destination. Now we need to set up your child's sleep space. I want you to replicate their sleep setup and routine as much as possible. That means I want you to bring their typical jammies, their sleep sack or their swaddle, white noise machine, the bedtime books you would read at home, their lovey, their toddler pillow. I could travel everywhere with my girl's toddler pillow still to this day. If you have a toddler clock, which you know how I feel about those if we have children over the age of 2, don't forget to bring the toddler light or clock. I even have families who will bring the sheet that their baby slept on the night before so that when they put it on the crib in the new location, it smells a little bit like home. So once you have your room set up, I want you to move forward with the assumption that your child is not going to have any sleep issues in this new space. Put them to bed or down for a nap at their typical time, do their typical bedtime or nap routine, and then hope for the best. Go into it with a positive attitude, just like you would at home. If they are thrown off by the new environment, it is totally fine to provide a little extra support while they adjust. And remember that keeping them on their schedule is also going to help them adapt and adjust to this new space. If you need to room share with your baby or child during the trip, whether it's at someone's house or at a hotel, things can be a little trickier. But it also might be a non event depending on your child's personality. So go into it assuming your child is going to sleep just fine. If they're a little bit older, explain what's going to happen. You're going to put them to bed, and then when it's time for you to go to bed, you're going to come in here and sleep. If you have a baby or a toddler or even a preschooler who's still able to fit in a travel crib, I highly recommend the Slumber Pod, which goes over your travel crib and makes it blackout and like their own little space. It's awesome. And it helps so many families who need to share space, and it travels really easily. It folds up very small and it can go right into your suitcase. If you're interested in purchasing a slumber pod at a discount, you can use my discount code, which I will also include in the show notes. It is sleep and wellness $20, and you'll save $20 when you order from their website. If you're staying at a home, you can do that typical bedtime routine and then leave the room like you typically would. If you're at a hotel, however, you're going to have to change things up because you can't just leave the hotel room. So, there, I want you to do your typical bedtime routine and then hang out in one of those little hallway nooks that head towards the bathroom or the bathroom itself, depending on the room setup. I think getting out of the eyesight of our little ones could be really helpful. And I cannot tell you how many times I've put my girls to bed in a hotel room. My husband has headed down to the lobby, and I have sat on the side of the tub or even in the tub reading a book or watching a show until my girls fell asleep. And then once they fell asleep, I would slip into bed and watch a show on my iPad with some headphones. So just stepping away, but obviously still being in the room, can help kids fall asleep when you're sharing space in a hotel. And because I'm someone who likes to prepare and have a plan, I always like to play out the worst case scenario. Let's say you're staying at a hotel and your 2-year-old wakes up during the night and starts throwing an absolute fit because they see you right there in the bed and they no longer want to sleep in that travel crib. What are you supposed to do then? Well, obviously, you're not going to leave them to cry or scream for very long because the neighboring room is definitely going to call the front desk and complain. If you're unable to calm your child down while keeping them in the crib by, rubbing their back, reassuring them, letting them know you're there, chances are they're going to end up out of their crib and possibly in your bed. I feel like that's kind of the most regressed we can get at this point is we end up co-sleeping. If the sleep situation regresses to that point, don't panic. Don't panic. I just want you to plan to do a total reset the moment you get home. I don't want one night to go by where you let things slip further or stay in their not so great place. When you get home, just go back to the typical healthy sleep habits that you practice at home. Kids, even infants, are so smart. If you always get things right back on track as soon as you get home, even if it means a little kind of reset or your child's frustrated briefly, if you quickly do that each time, it is not going to take more than a few trips for your child to realize that things might be a little just different when you travel. But when you're at home, here's how we handle sleep. Here's how we practice healthy sleep habits at home. And each reset is going to get easier and easier until it's a non event. Now, let's talk about traveling to different time zones. Generally speaking, I recommend switching your child to the new time zone ASAP. It's important to remember that our circadian rhythm is primarily driven by natural light and the rhythm of our day. So, when we eat meals, etc. So I find the faster switch to be easier and better for everyone involved. And if the time difference is just 1 hour, I would say you can either switch them or not switch them. But the bigger the time difference, the faster and more important it is, I think it is to switch. So back in the day when we used to travel a lot between northern Indiana and Chicago, there was a 1 hour time difference. And we've done it both ways. We've switched the kids, we've not switched the kids. I just don't think it's that big of an event. And so handle that whatever works best for your schedules. Particularly if you're only going for a night or two, then you might not even want to switch them. But when you go on a longer visit or a bigger shift in time, it's always best to switch pretty quickly. And if your kiddo is overtired or wakes too early one morning or too early from a nap, just use that extra bedtime and then maintain their schedule the next day. So let's give a little bit of an example here. If you're traveling cross country and dealing with, let's say, a 3 hour adjustment, I still want you to switch it in a 24-hour period. And we might even do it instantly. If naps were a mess and your child's gotten less sleep than normal, it's often easier to do an instant switch because they're just tired and disoriented, and we could kind of switch them right away. If that won't work because the timing of their day or it would result in them going to bed way too early, depending which way you're traveling, switch them halfway right when you arrive. So if you're traveling west to east, that may feel tricky because your child might not be ready to go to bed that early. And if that's the case, the most important thing you can do is wake them at their typical time the next morning, even if that means they got less sleep than usual. So you may need to wake them at, say, 7 a.m., which I realize back home would be 4 a.m. But that is how you're going to shift them. You're going to wake them at their typical time and then have them nap at their typical times that first full day, and then go to bed in their typical window that second night. So we want to make a quick shift, assuming that we're staying more than a couple days. Now, I want to touch on managing family expectations during the holidays. I did a whole episode on this with my husband last year. We'll link to it in the show notes. And I've shared this advice before, and we talk about it in that episode. But the very best advice my husband and I received from a marriage counselor after we became parents was to prioritize our family unit. So that is my husband and me and the kids, and to make decisions that were best for our family unit, to communicate those decisions to our extended families, and then to not worry about how anyone else felt about those decisions. That was not our problem. I realize this is way easier said than done, and it took some practice. So I won't say it feels easy out of the gate, but it was a complete game changer for us. And over time, our families accepted our style, and we did not do it in a way that put them out. I mean, they may have felt put out, but we did not demand that they change their schedules. We just dictated what our schedules were. So let me share an example. Throughout my entire childhood, we spent Christmas Eve with my dad's best friend's family. So very, very close family friends. It was a wonderful tradition, one that I now miss. We haven't been going back there as of late because we all have kids and it's very hectic. But our houses were 30 minutes apart, and these evenings with them often ended late because they were so fun. We had dinner, we did presents, we did games, and so they often ended late. So that first year, we decided to take control of our family unit after we had that disastrous Christmas that I mentioned earlier. I shared with my family that we would just be coming briefly to the gathering at our family friends' house, and then I would be driving home separately to put our kids to bed. I knew this is what we needed to do to have a happy house on Christmas Day. At this point, I had 2 toddlers, and I just didn't want to have a repeat of the year before. My parents did act a little bit annoyed that I wasn't going with our typical plan and that I was acting, kind of like a diva, I guess, on wanting to do things my way. But our family friends did graciously shift things a bit earlier, which we did not demand they do, but they did move dinner up a little bit earlier. And then we just went home shortly after dinner. And everyone survived. Even though there was some annoyed feelings, everyone survived. Most importantly, my little unit was happy on Christmas Day. The following year, my parents hosted that Christmas Eve at their house, and I just put our kids to bed before dinner. And then Mike and I got to enjoy the games and festivities after dinner. Mike's family wasn't quite as accommodating to our sleep schedules. So there were many trips, not so much holidays. Well, there was. I did miss a Christmas party. But there were many trips when the kids were little where I just skipped a lot of things. I just didn't go. So I would have Mike go join his family out at a dinner that didn't start till 7 or 7:30 or at a party. And then I stayed home with the girls. In fact, that last Christmas that we went back to Chicago, our flights were delayed. It was a debacle of a day. Our flights were delayed. It was negative 10 degrees when we landed there. It was already past the kids' bedtime. There was a big family reunion happening that we had planned to take the girls to briefly, and we just scrapped it. So we got our rental car. I dropped Mike off at this restaurant where the party was happening on the way to his dad's house. Then I just went back to the house, got the kids to bed, and I totally missed out on seeing a lot of the family members. They missed out on seeing the kids, but it was the start of our trip to the Midwest, and we both knew it just wasn't going to work. So there were times where he just did the things with his family, and I skipped out on them with the girls just to keep all the trains on the track for the rest of our trip. So that's how we kind of chose to handle things. And I am sure that some people in his family, and probably mine as well, thought I was nuts. But I kept my sanity, and my girls enjoyed their days with the family. So it's okay if your family or your in-laws don't understand why you want to prioritize your child's sleep schedule. It's also okay for you to hold your boundaries and to insist on maintaining those schedules, even if it means you miss out on some of the things. You're going to feel like a real adult when you do this. Trust me, it's kind of a game changer. And eventually, you holding that boundary and schedule will become the new normal for everyone. So there you have it. Those are my recommendations for handling sleep while you travel and my thoughts on managing family expectations around sleep this holiday season. Thanks for listening today. I hope these tips are helpful and they help you feel more confident as you head into the holiday travel season. And before I hop off, I want to ask a quick favor. If you've been enjoying this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you would rate and review it on Apple or Spotify. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.